This is going to get messy. I'm going to share some things on here, my testimony, if you will. I'm going to bare my soul, and it might suck. I'm going to tell y'all how I went from being a deracinated Christian sheep to being a racist white devil. And there's going to be parts of my story that you won't agree with. Join the club, bro. I already pissed off most of the people who I used to call friends. Not by directly insulting them, of course, but just by being true to myself and steering my life in the direction I want to go, instead of steering it in the direction they think I should go or the direction society thinks I should go. For starters, society doesn't get to decide shit for me anymore. Not after I learned the truth that society would prefer that I and others like me would just die in a Jewish war and allow our race to go extinct. Nope. Fuck what society wants. And as for my former friends, you who are okay with the white race going extinct, who gaslight guys like me when we point out the way things are going, like how whites used to be 30% of the world population and now we're down somewhere around 8%, and you're just okay with it. Well, I have no desire to be a people pleaser for your sake either. I have some things to say before I leave this world, hard things. Things that a lot of folks aren't gonna want to hear. So let's start with the elephant in the room. Why do I put on an act and dress up like a white devil? I know a lot of good white folks are offended by the devil thing. Even anti-Abrahamics, they point out that LaVey was a Jew and that Satan is a Jewish villain. And they're right about that part. But I don't think they understand the big picture, at least not the way I do. I had a Satanist phase. I read LaVey, O9A, JOS. I found some tiny bits of truth in what some of the Satanist authors said. But even the Jew is honest at times. Like when Marcus Eli Ravage let it slip that Christianity was a psyop to get the Goyim worshipping their Yah monster. Or when LaVey pointed out that Christianity turning the Gentile gods into devils was a political control tactic. That one opened my eyes. But I have no interest in serving a kosher demon the Jews set up as controlled opposition. What I'm much more interested in are the Gentile devils they were trying to vilify. You know, Pan, Cernunnos, Veles, Thulor. All of them gods of nature. We'll come back to the Begelian hatred of nature in a later episode, I promise. To me, the white devil is a symbol, an archetype, a forgotten part of the white racial soul, a part that we need to get back in touch with if we're going to reclaim our destiny. It's the wild part. It's that scary part that your pastor, your teacher, and your television told you to suppress. If you've seen Twitter X recently, you might notice all these violent attacks on our people. And nobody does anything to these attackers. Worse than that, nobody does anything to the traitors in high places who allow these savages to get away with murder while enacting laws that force us to live in close proximity to them, waiting for the day that it's our turn to be attacked. Nobody's coming to save us. This is the point of the white devil. Other tribes used to call us white devils when they still feared us. And we aren't going to be able to reclaim our destiny until they fear us again. So the white devil isn't about Satan. It's about rebellion against the false order and a return to the natural order. Let's talk about rebellion. Ever notice how our folk seems to have no problem being scary and violent when they serve their masters? But the second someone rebels against the Vorakian system, they always discourage them. Violence never solves anything. Don't hate your enemies, Goy. And after enough pressure is exerted, either real or imagined, like the threat of incarceration or the system's own violence directed at its enemies, enemies like you and me, people always shrink back. Disclaimers, copes. I recently heard a bro say to me that he likes to vote. He likes to vote so hard. What our people seem to be missing is a capacity to disobey our masters. That's one place where the white devil shines. The Gentile devil is the ultimate symbol of rebellion against Begelian tyranny. Think about it. What do all devils have? Horns. And what are horns for? What do they do? A livestock animal that has horns is a lot more dangerous for the shepherd to deal with, isn't he? Bad for the farmers, good for the animals imprisoned on the farm. Look at the symbolism for a minute. There's all these threats in the Bible. Jesus separating the sheep from the goats, Abraham sacrificing a ram who gets his horns caught in the thicket. Of course, the Yah monster prefers a human sacrifice, but an animal will suffice, a horned ram. The Yah monster teaches his chosen ones that Gentiles are basically animals in human form. There's a reason the farmer might want to get rid of the horned animals first. Probably makes the herd more manageable. At least he won't have to worry about getting gored to death while he's harvesting his meat. No horns, no threat. So getting back to rebellion, whites seem to have an obedience disease. Rebellion is the obvious cure. Before a man can do rebellious deeds, he must first be able to think rebellious thoughts. Simple. But there's another useful aspect to the archetype of the white devil. What is a devil? It's a monster. Probably the most terrifying kind of monster there is. Think about it. Who's the ultimate big bad if not the devil? And what do monsters do to people? Fear. They cause people to feel fear. Fear is extremely powerful. I would say it's even more powerful than love, as far as emotions go anyway. Love is tied to the reproductive instinct. But fear is about staying alive. Fear is the survival instinct screaming at you, back the fuck out if you want to live. That's why it's so powerful. If it wasn't so powerful, our governments wouldn't use it to control us. At this time in history, the system seems to have a monopoly on fear. Ask yourself, is that a good thing? Is that going to work to our benefit in the future? Be honest. That's where the archetype of the white devil proves useful once again. Imagine if a bunch of talented, resourceful, capable whites suddenly became okay with being the monster. What kinds of things would happen? How would the system react? What if there were so many monsters that the government's attempt to catch them all proved to be too overwhelming a task? Would the puppet masters be shitting their pants? Do you think maybe they might be pumping out propaganda to try to prevent things like this from happening? Who knows? How do you think the Turks felt about old Uncle Vlad? Bad Vlad. Sure. Vlad may not be the best role model for a number of reasons. It's come out recently that he was a monster to his own people, which is despicable. But so is moral fagging and hand-wringing, especially when our people are being attacked, raped, and killed by magic noglins on a daily basis. So say what you want about Uncle Vlad. He understood the value of becoming the monster, of unleashing his inner devil. He understood psychology and the power of fear. There's a third aspect to the archetype of the white devil that I'd like to point out. For people who might not have considered this stuff before, I mean, we're all guilty of surface thinking sometimes, some of us more than others. But since you're still listening, I'm going to bet that you're one of the real ones, one of the noticers, a real player character. The aspect I'm talking about is, of course, the trickster. I'll probably get a little grief from some of my Viking bros for this. When they think trickster, they imagine all the shitty things Loki did in the Eddas. Some of them even equate the trickster archetype with the Yaw monster. And they're justified. It's a good call. But I still think they're wrong. I think they're missing something. I think there was a reason Odin allowed Loki a place among the gods. Odin was no spotless lamb himself. Many consider him to be an amoral, almost a left-hand path kind of god. It's not my place to judge Odin or the other gods, but I can spot patterns and I can notice connections. One of the things I notice is that trickery and deception have been around a long time. They're older than the tiger's stripes and the spider's web. Is the tiger morally wrong for using his stripes to hide from his prey? Is the spider wrong for weaving a sticky web? What happens to the predator when it fails to catch the prey? Is it good and moral to let yourself starve to death? This is where the moral fagging usually comes in. Some bro will say something like, "You can't out-Jew the Jew." What, so we're supposed to obey every rule while the opponent breaks them all? And that's gonna bring us victory? Don't stoop down to their level. That's another moral fagging statement. This is what the 9 Noble Virtues crowd often misses. They seem to forget what the Havamal says about deception. To his friend, a man should be a friend and repay gifts with gifts. Laughter men should accept with laughter, but return deception for a lie. Look at the natural order. Does a mountain lion sneak up on its prey? Do wolves hunt in packs? There's your answer. No moral fagging required. We are under no natural obligation to be honest or play fair with enemies. And to those who think I'm wrong, you're cooked, bro. You're not gonna make it. This is where the trickster side of the white devil archetype proves useful. Cunning isn't a sin, it's a virtue. Remember the Joker movie that came out a while back? There's a reason all those memes resonated with so many of our guys. The Joker is another manifestation of that trickster archetype. He's dangerous, unpredictable, and he can easily outsmart and outmaneuver the moral fagging of the caped crusader. Now, if you were an evil globo-goblin, wouldn't you want to discourage white people from thinking like the Joker? Wouldn't they be easier to deal with if they thought like Batman, who has to obey his moral codes, his slave morality? So those are some of the reasons behind the white devil symbolism. Not all of them. As I start sharing more lore, you'll find other reasons. Let's do some housekeeping and talk about what this series is going to be about. Like I said at the beginning of this, I'm going to share my story, the good, the bad, the cringe. Lots of cringe, actually. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. And you must pass through the gauntlet of cringe if you really want to unleash your inner devil. Okay, I just made that up. But you might find out that it's true. Let me know in the comments. Also, since, as you might have surmised, I'm going to be dealing with some unpopular and dangerous topics that might push up against the limits of free speech, especially Elon's freedom of reach, I have to protect myself here with a little disclaimer. First of all, this channel is for entertainment purposes only, and whatever I say is most likely some bullshit I made up for the fictional book series I'm writing. Don't take anything too seriously, especially if it was told to you by some dude in a devil mask who says it's okay to be a trickster. Common sense stuff, really. I'm just gonna read this next part, but I totally mean it. I mean it so hard. Most of the story I'm going to share with you in the Elfred Chronicles is based on true events. The majority of the moments, the weird synchronicities, and the lessons actually happened in my real life. That being said, I have changed names and details to respect the privacy of others, combined some folks and events together for better clarity, and tossed in a few allegorical or mythical flourishes to accentuate the bigger ideas and breathe a little more vitality into the story. I do want it to be a little more entertaining and meaningful than the vacuous tedium that takes up so much of our lives. That's just part of being a good storyteller. You get to decide what lands as straight fact and what feels like myth or metaphor. Something to consider: if every detail here is 100% literal truth, that would be truly remarkable. But if most of it is made up bullshit, that's even more impressive. What kind of a tortured genius could create all of this out of nothing? Consider yourself forewarned. Quick legal heads up: anything in the story involving illegal activities, like the use of prohibited substances, is of course completely fictional and allegorical. I don't advocate or encourage any kind of illegal activity. The most important parts of this story are the lore and philosophy, and hopefully the freedom to think crazy thoughts and hold contrarian positions will never go away. I'm gonna keep things as real as possible because an important motivation for me creating this series is for me to be able to share my life. I won't get the catharsis I'm seeking if I'm not really sharing my lived experience to the fullest extent possible. Alright folks, that's all I've got for now. Thanks for joining me. Haelym Val Duros.